In this video, we are going to review this Vizio OLED, the most affordable OLED TV in the USA. Hello everyone, Vincent from HDTV Test here, and this is the 55-inch Vizio OLED, model number OLED55H1, which retails for $1,300 in the United States. I imported it into the UK 5 weeks ago, paying a hefty price that would make even Waitrose shoppers wince. And it's only now that I finally get around to reviewing it. I've been wanting to learn some strategies to stop procrastinating, but I keep putting it off. The design of the Vizio OLED is simple yet elegant. OLED's self-emissive properties allow for a super slim bezel and panel which sits on a central metallic stand shaped to accommodate Vizio's own Elevate soundbar. The connections are found on the left rear of the display, including 4 HDMI inputs, of which HDMI 2 and HDMI 3 are HDMI 2.1 ports with a bandwidth of 40 gigabits per second each, as verified using the versatile Meridio 7G signal generator. The Vizio OLED uses a 2020 WRGB OLED panel from LG Display. All OLED televisions are capable of true blacks, so in our reviews, we normally pay more attention to near black handling, which can trip up some OLEDs. The Vizio OLED does not seem to implement any specific measures to mitigate near black chrominance overshoot beyond what's already provided by LG Display's 2020 T-Con. So our review unit exhibited flashing artifacts not only on test patterns, but also in real-world content such as this heavily compressed broadcast footage of Game of Thrones. At the other end of the contrast ratio spectrum, setting the correct peak white level was tricky for a few reasons. First, the peak luminance control has no off switch, which means there will be white subpixel boosting at all times. Even with peak luminance set to low and luminance dropped all the way down to 0, peak white on our review sample still measured around 150 candelas per square meter, which is too bright for video enthusiasts targeting 100 to 120 candelas per square meter for SDR viewing in a dark room or even a pitch black room. To make matters worse, the luminance setting didn't stick at all. Every time we restarted the TV, switched inputs, or even came out from the color tuner calibration menu, the brightness of the screen would go back up to default, even though the luminance value stayed the same. To demonstrate this bug, here we have an arbitrary luminance value of 24. Normally, you would expect luminance value of 25 to be brighter, but because of this bug, increasing luminance to 25 actually darkened the picture, because the true luminance value was the default in whichever picture mode you are using. This bug also meant that every time we switched sources, we had to increase and then decrease the luminance slider just to make sure we are getting the correct level of light output, which is a tad frustrating if you ask me. With this out of the way, by default, the Vizio OLED clipped whiter than white detail, which could be recovered by lowering contrast by a couple of clicks. The inbuilt automatic brightness limiter, or ABL, was slightly more aggressive than the LG CX or C10 OLED, based on our own custom-authored ABL test pattern. Color accuracy was excellent after calibration, with average delta errors of less than 1 on this challenging Color Checker SG chart, where 140 patches were measured, and no inaccuracies exceeding the humanly perceptible threshold of delta error 3. As a result, general colors, including skin tones, looked natural and realistic in real-world viewing, and the Vizio OLED's cinematic quality was further helped by its ability to natively reproduce 24 frames per second films smoothly without telecinic judder. With all motion settings disabled, motion resolution came in at the sample and hold baseline of 300 lines. Engaging motion blur reduction more than doubled the figure to the traditional OLED ceiling of 650 lines. And if clear action was also enabled, the Vizio OLED 55H1 would reach or even exceed 1080 lines of motion resolution. Based on our slow motion analysis, and also the increase in motion clarity without incurring significant flicker or brightness drop, Clear action behaved like the 120Hz black frame insertion auto setting implemented on LG and Sony OLEDs, only that Vizio's version was an on-off toggle. Upscaling quality was above average, retrieving clean and sharp detail from this standard definition SMPTE test card with only mild junk pixels and overshoot, which transferred nicely to real-life material, making even grubby standard def channels watchable. The Vizio OLED correctly detected and processed 3:2 cadence, but stumbled as far as video mode interlacing was concerned. Its jaggies suppression wasn't very effective, leading to jagged edges and aliasing in video-based interlaced content, so it's best to send a progressive video signal to the TV at all times. Noise reduction was enabled by default even in the most accurate calibrated dark picture preset, so you will need to turn them off to restore film grain integrity. The default sharpness value of 20 still applied some edge enhancement, prompting us to reduce it all the way to 0 to achieve neutral sharpening. The contour smoothing decontouring filter worked well to reduce in-content polarization, but don't go too high or you'll risk erasing tons of detail. Full chroma bandwidth could be obtained by engaging full chroma 444 in the input signal detail submenu. As we have come to expect from OLED, especially a 55-inch model, bright uniformity was remarkably clean, with no sign of banding, dirty screen effect, or color tinting. Dark uniformity was one of the cleaner ones we've encountered, with some thin vertical bands and corner vignetting, but honestly, our camera footage made them look much worse than in real life. We were totally not bothered at all in actual viewing. For HDR, the default peak luminance setting was low in all picture presets, even Dolby Vision ones, which not only handicapped the television's brightness, but also caused the PQ-EOTF to undertrack the ST2084 standard, so make sure to set peak luminance to high when watching HDR content. After calibration, peak brightness measured 550 nits on a 10% window and 130 nits full fill. DCI-P3 color gamut coverage came in at 99% UV, while Rectin 220 was 76%, with the spectral power distribution showing characteristics of white OLED with color filter. As you can see, there is a strange dip in the PQ-EOTF tracking just above 1000 nits, and the Vizio OLED did not significantly adapt its tone curve to 1000 nit versus 4000 nit content, choosing instead to settle somewhere in between. As a consequence, occasionally 1000 nit content would appear slightly darker than reference, even though the overall HDR image still looked very refined with great contrast and no blooming artifacts, thanks to OLED's pixel-level light control. For 4000 nit HDR content, there's minor clipping of the brightest specular highlight detail, such as the sun and surrounding clouds in pan. Native 10-bit gradation was quite decent, with the contour smoothing function working effectively to clear up polarization in the skies of the Martian. The first time we played Dolby Vision content on any input, including Netflix, the peak luminance setting would default to low, so make sure you change it to high for the highest peak brightness and correct tone mapping, although there's still some mild crushing of shadow detail in Dolby Vision mode. We verified that the Vizio OLED supports HDR10 Plus by playing an HDR10 Plus 4K Blu-ray disc from a Panasonic UB9000 player. For gaming, input lag measured 21 milliseconds at 60 Hz with game mode engaged, and fluctuated at 120 Hz because the Vizio OLED was basically discarding frames, so there's no improvement in motion clarity over 60 Hz. When we first hooked up an Xbox Series X to the Vizio OLED, the TV was capped at 1080p SDR, so you will need to go into the Input Picture Settings submenu and change HDMI mode to 2.1 before you can enjoy 4K HDR on the television. ALLM automatically switched the Vizio OLED into game mode correctly, but VRR didn't seem to work at 4K 120Hz, resulting in loss of signal, requiring us to disable VRR or downgrade to 4K 60Hz before we could play Assassin's Creed Valhalla on the Xbox Series X. In game mode at certain resolution and frame rate, a number of picture-affecting controls seem to be locked out, and in case you are wondering, the cryptically named Game HDR setting is actually HGIG, which hard clips according to our measurements. So you can use it together with the HGIG calibration screen on Xbox and PlayStation consoles to prevent double tone mapping. Let's sum up. The Vizio OLED is capable of producing beautiful cinematic picture quality. But at the time we filmed this video in November 2020, there are more bugs than in Starship Troopers, with a number of picture settings defaulting to suboptimal values out of the box. If its price drops to below $1,000 again, we still think it's worth picking up, since OLED's self-emissive strengths of true blacks, vibrant colors and wide viewing angles are still going to blow away any competing LED LCDs at this price point. However, we sincerely hope that Vizio can address some of the bugs we pointed out in this video and implement better out-of-the-box settings to provide a display worthy of consideration for those who care about picture accuracy and next-gen HDMI 2.1 gaming. If you wish to watch more of our technical TV reviews, we've created a playlist here. And if you want to watch some of our technical TV comparisons, I've compiled a playlist here. If you'd like to click on it, and I will see you in the next video.